Nils Clauss is a photographer, a cinematographer, and an editor. What draws the world to this young German artist? Nils Clauss, who grew up in a small village in Essen, Germany, always dreamt of life in the big city. Influenced by his architect grandfather and brother, he infuses his works with a unique structural perspective. After working in Germany, Australia, and Hong Kong, Clauss fell in love with the meta city of Seoul. He centered his focus on Seoul's dual identity of the modern and traditional, and particularly on the social minorities of Korea. His camera captured an orchestra in Pyongyang, North Korea, the homeless in Seoul, and the lives of the Korean elderly. His work brought him international acclaim at major competitions. Clauss calls attention to social issues and human life through his work, at times somber and at times comical, in various forms including photos, short films, and music videos.
They asked me 3 times if I was sure about the address I'm living at, because they said, everyone's moving out, so why are you moving in? That's also something I need to tell myself every time. I gotta be out there, I gotta do this, and I've got so many ideas sitting there.
Join me, Susan Lee MacDonald, and hear his amazing story and learn about the deeper meanings behind his work on this week's The Interview. Hello, Nils.
Hello, Susan.
So great to have you on my show.
Oh, thanks for having me here.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so excited. You know, it's not every day that you get to meet someone who has such a prolific body of work like yourself. You know, a videographer and cinematographer, and I can't wait to introduce you to our worldwide audience.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Lee MacDonald, and welcome back to The Interview. Today, I have wonderful videographer and cinematographer Nils Clauss here with us. He's going to share his experiences here in Korea and his thoughts on his videography and his photography. So let's get to meet Nils. Nils, I heard that recently you went to North Korea. Now that's not a place that a lot of people have access to go to, and I'm curious what type of work took you to North Korea?
Yeah, I went to Pyongyang to shoot a documentary last month.
Wow.
And actually the Goethe Institute, here based in Seoul, the Goethe Institute Korea, they invited me to join them on their trip. And they organized a trip for the Munich Chamber Orchestra during the Asia tour to play a concert in Pyongyang.
Wow.
But it wasn't only a concert, it was also workshops with students at the Music Academy up in Pyongyang.
North Korean students.
North Korean students, right. So they were practicing together in chamber music classes for 3 days, but also together in the whole orchestra.
Wow.
And then after 4 days they played a concert together. So my role was to be there as a photographer, but also as a filmmaker to shoot a documentary about this event.
Nun ist es gelungen.
말이 안 통하는 게 조금 불편하긴 한데 그 외에는 역시 음악은 세계 공통을 할지 감정이 통하니까 불편하지 않고 아주 편하고 기분이 좋습니다.
Wow, okay.
Selma.
Selma, oh. Also ich bin nicht sicher, aber ich glaube, die produzieren schon lange keine Oboen mehr.
Sehr, vielleicht mehr gesungen noch. 1, 2. Sind Sie einverstanden?
Ja, sicher.
Ja?
Ja. Ja.
Well, you know, for someone like yourself who has been involved in photography and cinematography for quite some time, I'm sure that that was quite an experience of a lifetime.
Right, right. I mean, myself, I see myself mainly as a filmmaker, but it's also great if you have an audience through TV, and it's also great if you go to places where you normally don't get to go to. So I think I have to say the whole thing of me going there, it was a commissioned work. I was hired by the Goethe Institute to go there, but so you cannot be as creative as you want to be as a filmmaker if it's your own piece. But yeah, they gave me a lot of freedom, and I had a lot of like creative input I could put into it. So yeah, I was quite happy about that. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your work. You've done quite a number of things in your time as a filmmaker, cinematographer, and photographer. And you've chosen to make your home base now here in Korea, in South Korea, in Seoul. And I'm sure that you have some personal reasons as well. But let's talk a little bit about why you chose to focus here in Seoul and in Korea.
Right. I've been here now for a little more than 7 years. And when I left Germany, I couldn't tell how long I would actually end up here. And I had plans to come here, I had plans to be here, I had plans to work here, but it was all open, and I've never been to Korea before I actually ended up here in the end of 2005.
Wow. You've traveled a lot, I imagine, and I've seen a lot of your photos where you have traveled quite a bit. And I'm curious what you feel are some of the differences between the architecture of maybe some European cities that you've been in Australia and Southeast Asia versus Korea, and what's the appeal of Seoul and downtown Seoul, for example?
Right. If I make a general comparison between the Western and the Eastern city, I'd say that particularly here in Seoul, the city is developing really quickly. So everything is happening really quick and fast here. So I think as a photographer, filmmaker, like with my focus on space and architecture, it's a great place to be in, because you can document these changes without suddenly realizing you're an old grandfather and everything happens really slow.
Yeah. So I'm curious, of all the different types of subject matter that you could choose, why focus on architecture? Why focus on certain types of spaces?
I think it's related to my background a bit, and like my grandfather has been an architect, and my brother's an architect. And I also wanted to become an architect for a long time.
So it's in your family?
It's in my family, but then my parents would say, like, oh, we don't need another architect. So
was your father an architect too, or a different?
No, my father, yeah, he's a doctor. Like, it's totally something different. But they didn't expect me to take like that kind of like path in my career.
I see.
But at that time, I thought, yeah, maybe I should look into something different. But I think I never got rid of this like interest, and like fortunately, so these days I have to say I much rather work on architecture and space through photography and film than just being an architect and sit there and plan.
So as someone who looks through the lens, whether as a photographer or a filmmaker, when you see space, I imagine that you see it in a different way than just regular people who don't take photos and do film. What would you define as space, and how do you look at space?
I think I look at space as a photographer and filmmaker, but I can also appreciate space as a personal human being, sort of. Yeah. But in terms of my work, I mainly look at space in terms of maybe social, like political relations.
I see.
So I look for content. Yeah.
So you look for how space relates to other objects or people or other situations?
Exactly. Okay. But as a personal, like myself, yeah, I appreciate space in terms of like good planned architecture, like beautiful designed architecture. So yeah, it's definitely, you got to distinguish between the two.
From what I understand, you are interested in basically kind of 3 types of themes as you're doing your work, and I'd like to go through kind of each of them. The first being places of disappearance. Places of disappearance, explain to me what that means and how you've been able to kind of capture that in your work.
Right. Yeah, partly I think when I started working on that topic, it was related a bit to myself. When I moved neighborhoods in Seoul, I moved into a neighborhood which was close to being demolished. So
Oh, no.
it was like an older neighborhood, and they were planning to build like an apartment area in that space.
Kind of a gentrification of an area where you used to live, right?
Right, exactly. So yeah, spaces of disappearance in that sense, it's something which I could explain of these buildings being demolished and taken apart, taken away, and then something else is being built. Another thing which I also focus within my work is these pojangmachas, like these tents where you have little food stalls or like tiny restaurants where with people after work they will go there and they gather with their friends and colleagues, and they're fascinating because they're these like really beautifully lit up tents at night, and so the color is really significant. They're like orange or green, and they pop up really within the dark. And
can you tell us why you chose pojangmachas? I mean, that's a pretty interesting type of space here that's kind of only in Korea, these kind of orangey tents that people go to have either some soju or to have some other drinks with their friends. Why the pojangmacha?
Yeah, because they also fall into this group of spaces of disappearance, because many of these tents throughout the past years have been removed from the city center into like the outer areas, or businesses have gone dead because of the removal. So for me as a photographer, I always feel it's important to document spaces which might be gone at some stage.
I see.
And to create kind of this like documentary history for the past generations.
Wow. Tell me about your project called, if I'm saying it correctly, Tsutskwang?
Yeah, Tsutskwang, yeah,
Tsutskwang.
correct, yeah, good.
What does that mean, and what does that mean, and what's that about?
Yeah, it also relates to the work in the neighborhood which was going to demolish, I talked about earlier.
Yes.
But it's a terminology which relates, which you find in chess. So you only have the king at the end, and you have no choice. You got to move. You're forced to move.
Okay.
So I thought this terminology would be appropriate to call my series, which I shot in these empty houses before demolishment, after the people moved out. I thought it's an appropriate topic for that.
I see.
You're forced to move. You don't have any option.
I see. And with that project, what was one of the main drivers of doing that particular project?
Yeah, I moved into the neighborhood, and actually after 3 months I already had to move out. And
so you just moved there and they asked you to move right back out?
Right. So
oh no.
You could maybe say, okay, the housing agency, they tricked me into a contract, but obviously I didn't look around really carefully, because at that time when I moved in, already most of the people have been gone in that neighborhood.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I called the internet company to set up the internet, and they asked me 3 times if I was sure about the address I'm living at, because they said, everyone's moving out, so why are you moving in? Yeah, so pretty much from the beginning I realized there's something wrong. But then I don't regret, because I definitely got something out of it. I got to know this whole issue of redevelopment, and I was really close to it, and that was my interest in the topic, that I realized there's tensions between the people who still inhabit these places and the housing like construction companies. There was a lot of like fightings going on there, a lot of quarrel. So I could follow that a bit, and then I started to frequent these empty houses when people already left. But before the buildings are demolished, also the construction companies come in, and they take out all the electric wiring, and they demolish the infrastructure in the bathroom so that you cannot run water anymore, and take out the insulation. And these images, they seemed like very violent to me, and of this like destruction going on there. So I thought, yeah, that's something interesting to document with my photography.
Wow. You also focus on something called senior living,
Right.
and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a music video for a Norwegian band called Røyksopp. Me and my working partner Neil Dowling did together. And yeah, senior living, it's kind of a Bonnie and Clyde story,
Nice.
based in Seoul. It's about these two older people who meet each other and they connect, and they're a bit on the illegal side. Yeah, they steal a Ferrari and they take it to Hangang, and they just enjoy their time with each other.
The image is so funny, actually. It's somewhat comical, and I don't know if you intended it to be that way, because normally you don't think of people who are senior citizens riding around in a Ferrari and all the different events that happen after.
Right, and definitely not stealing a Ferrari.
Definitely not, yeah.
Yeah, no, like, I think the approach we want to take with our film work, Neil and I together, working together, is more on the comical side, and with my photography I'm more on the serious side, so that's probably more German, if you could say, and
Yes.
the comedians are, yeah, it's an international language, we all want to laugh and enjoy
Definitely.
laughing. So.
Nils, I'd like to learn a little bit more about your other theme, which is rural versus urban, and you have a project called Urban Nature, which I'd love to learn more about.
Okay, yeah, Urban Nature is a photography project which I did in 2009, and I photographed rural spaces on urban city walls. Like more and more I came across like these like big paintings on walls, which I
Like
found
big murals.
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
much, yeah.
and I was quite surprised to find them, but it seemed like they tell me a lot about the city and about the people within the city, because I felt it's kind of a nostalgia for the rural space, and it's something which really also connects to me and myself, because I grew up in a small place in northern Germany, and then I came after high school. I moved out and I moved to the city and lived in different countries, came to Seoul, and throughout my years in Seoul I also developed kind of this craving again for the rural space. So maybe that's also why I found this attraction in these rural paintings on the walls. And so I thought maybe it's the longing of people for that space, which maybe they also frequented before, because we talked about the people in Seoul mainly coming from a rural space who moved to the city once. And if you want to find that rural space, you got to leave the city. And there's not so many parks where you can kind of like get that same feeling.
Tell us about the award that you won.
No, I won the European Architectural Photography Award. It's an international competition, and the competition had the topic in between. So I felt that these pictures describe that topic very well. Where there's like, it's not rural, but it's not urban, and yeah, it's something in between, and that's my whole interest in that topic, where rural meets the urban, and also where city, back in the days, I think city was always defined by borders. You had like the city wall, and behind the city wall the rural would start. But now with these satellite cities, they continue, and they spread out into the rural space.
There's like no end
There's
to
no
a
end
city.
anymore.
It's just kind of a city attached to another city, attached to another city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here in Korea, you find Seoul and Incheon in the northwestern part, and then you have Busan in the southeastern part. And in that corridor, it's actually where you find most of the population. I think 80% of the Korean population live in that corridor, and it's a very urban corridor. So I also talked in some of my works about like South Korea as a meta city,
Yes.
where everything spreads out and the country sort of like turns into a city. Yeah.
Now, Sin City was something else that you worked on, and it's a music video dealing with the topics of city and countryside. It's got the fish character Nemo
Right,
as
it
its
has,
main character.
Yeah, a helium blown up fish, and
Yeah.
one of these flying fish, and they really look very authentic. Yeah, so we saw one of these fish and we thought like we wanted to do something with it. It's a music video which I did with another friend, Stuart Howe, together, and but the idea originally traces back to a bike trip which I did. I took my bike from Seoul to the East Coast down to Pohang.
Wow.
One of the people I met when I hit the East Coast, close to Uljin, I was passing with my bike, and like one older guy, he saw me and like he called me back, hey, come here. And then I came back, and then I joined them for a couple of snacks, and I stayed for dinner. And then he hooked me up with one of his friends who's running a pension there. So I stayed at the pension for free that night, and I made a few new friends. And since then I had an idea with this space and these people. I wanted to make a music video because the guy I met there, he's a petty diving instructor.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I developed this idea of making a script with a diving instructor who's always ready to dive, but he doesn't have any business. So he's always sitting there in his diving suit and waiting for customers to come in.
So that's basically kind of his marketing scheme, is just to wear his diving suit everywhere.
Yeah, or maybe
attracting customers.
Maybe his frustration of his business like going dead. Yeah, maybe something of both. Yeah. So yeah, and then in the music video, we didn't get him, but we got one of the other friends who I also got to know there as the main character. And he's the owner of the Nemo fish. And Nemo is escaping that rural space because he's bored with the countryside. You know, a lot of us, we grew up in the countryside. We're bored with the countryside and we want to escape to the city. But then you move to the city and maybe after many years you realize maybe it's not that much better, or maybe it's not as great as we thought it would be. Yeah? So that fish, after making a journey, sort of a road movie like within Seoul, realizes like he went through a lot of disappointments here, and then in the end, like through a coincidence, he's actually being brought back to the countryside. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, with a bit of comedy, we tried to tell that story.
So what's the intent behind making Lonely Sea? What's the story you're trying to tell?
The story is about two siblings which are intimate and close with each other without getting physical, but they've got a relation which is stronger than just like being siblings. So they feel like some affection for each other. It was important to make it as subtle as possible because we didn't want to put that into the face, and we didn't want to talk about incest. Like if people think this video is about incest, I would say no, it's not. Yeah, it's a love story. Yeah, and brother and sister, they can also like have affection for each other. Yeah, but where are the borders of like affection? Where can we take affection? Where we're not supposed to take affection to. So I think that's what we wanted to tell.
Clauss visits a traditional market in Heuksukdong, Seoul, with his teacher and friend Abraham Lim. It's late in the evening, and the winds are icy, but nothing can stop the vitality of the night market. This is a place that is filled with energy, even in the intense competition of the city. Clauss heads to his favorite vegetable store.
잘 지내셨어요? 춥지 않아요?
아, 춥죠.
아주머님 안녕하세요. 친구도 혹시 에이브럼 아세요? 멋있죠?
네, 멋있죠.
예, 예.
여기도 멋있죠.
근데 남편 있죠?
남편이 있지 당연히.
소개해 주려고 했는데.
왜?
근데,
나이 많아.
많아요? 25? My former professor at Chungang University, but also a very good friend, Abram Lim, he's visiting from China, and he's living in China now, and he came over to Korea for 10 days.
Is it really special? Special to you?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's great. That makes me feel good. Special.
He doesn't believe me.
While customers come and go, Clauss takes out his camera in a corner of the store. He often takes photos of the people at the market and gives them out as gifts. For Lim, what kind of student was Clauss?
I might not use it.
He's terrible. He brings you out in the cold. He makes you carry things for him and stand here while he gets all the credit. No. I'm joking, of course. No, Nils is a great friend. And the thing about Western filmmakers is we're kind of colleagues always. Even though he's my student, he's very skilled. So I ask him for advice, and we compare work. And filmmaking, in that sense, you know, Western University, you kind of are still colleagues because we're all filmmakers.
Clauss picks up some broccoli.
하나 잡아주세요. 꽃처럼 잡아주세요. 왼쪽으로. 더 가까이. 오케이, 좋아요.
Although this happens often, the people in the market are still a little shy.
조금 가까이 웃지 마세요, 이제. 집중!
The women follow his instructions and try to stop laughing. They strike a pose again.
또 이거 들으라고?
이렇게.
Clauss's visits always add a touch of fun and wit to the vendor's everyday routine.
우리는 대화가 안 통하잖아요. 근데 한국말을 너무 잘하시는 거야. 그래가지고 오 한국말 잘하시네. 그냥 우리 부인도 한국 사람입니다 하더라고요. 그래가지고 나중에 아기도 데리고 와서 보여주고 그래가지고 친하게 됐어요.
그냥 지금 스치는 느낌만으로도 굉장히 즐겁고 이렇게 분위기가 밝은 분위기의 그런 사진들일 것 같습니다.
In the same context were rule and
Clauss and Lim head out from the market to a snowy mountain. Even in the freezing cold, they have something they must do tonight.
Today it's quite rough to shoot under these conditions. Yeah, it's probably -17 out here, so it's hard to get the shot you want. Yeah, but I like to go out at night and do night shots, night photography. And especially with the snow, you don't get that so many times in Seoul, yeah? So I just want to use the opportunity and take a picture with the snow here. But yeah, it's too strengthening, yeah, so we got to go somewhere warm.
Seoul's night view is unique and fantastic, and not even the below-zero temperatures can stop Clauss's passion.
Oh, thanks.
Once he decides to shoot, nothing and no one can persuade him to give up his work. Clauss spends a large portion of his time in Seoul working in Hukseokdong. What makes this area so special for him?
Like Hukseokdong, in my opinion, pretty much describes what's taking place in Seoul and also taking place in South Korea, because it's an area where you have reconstruction going on, where old areas being exchanged for new area, so that's quite significant. And we've been to the marketplace before. Areas like that probably they will be gone in the future. So it's interesting for me also to document that area.
I don't recommend to Nils anymore. He's graduated. If he needs my opinion, then he asks me and I'll tell him. But he has his own style, and for students, they need to make their own style, make their own mistakes, and learn from that. And that'll create his unique style. So my recommendations to him are not so far away and not so cold. How's that? Is that good?
Clauss and Lim met as teacher and student and have grown to become friends, rivals, and mentors to each other. they continue to inspire each other and the world with their creative work.
Let's talk about you.
Okay, right.
let's get into you. You grew up in a rural town in Germany, and what was that like for you growing up?
Right. I think for a child, in the first place, it's a very ideal setting to grow up. Yeah, it's a beautiful, nice little town. It's 4 kilometers to the ocean.
What is it called?
It's called Esens. Yeah, it's a very tiny place. It's between Hamburg and Amsterdam, I would say, close to the Dutch border. But if you grow up, you get older, you're in your teens, that's probably not what you find interesting so much anymore. So like quickly I developed the feeling that I want to move on and I want to get to know something else. And my parents also, they strongly encouraged us, like all my siblings, they went overseas for a year for exchange, and they also gave me that opportunity to do that, but I felt I want to finish my high school and move on. But when I was 16, I went to South Africa for 6 weeks to do an exchange.
So was that the first time that you'd ever been out of the country?
We traveled a lot with my family, like for summer holidays, but it was the first time myself like going to some different place.
So at a young age, you experienced kind of living abroad or studying abroad for even a short time. And what was that like for you in South Africa at the time?
I think that time was a huge period of change for me, to reflect my time back home, but also to think about, how do I want to move on? And can I picture like living somewhere overseas? And I don't regret my childhood back home, because I think lots of the stuff and my creative work which I try to pursue is probably also based on my childhood, because there was before times of cell phones and like smartphones, and also computers. Like I had a computer like I think in my late teens, the first computer. So you needed to go outside and play. And my parents would say, go outside and play. And then what am I supposed to play? And then you need to build things, or you need to discover things, and you constantly need to like build this curiosity and this interest in things which in the first place are not interesting at all.
Were you a very imaginative child?
I'd say so, and I was always interested in kind of more like the arty side of life, I'd say. During school I also joined a photography workshop, and I got my first camera really early. I think my grandma gave me a camera as a present. And also when we went on family trips, on holidays, I wouldn't really take pictures of my family and my siblings and other people. I would wander about and take pictures of architecture in a very early age.
So from a really young age, you had an interest in photography, in looking through the lens and taking photos of places.
Right. In that sense, I think I was very introverted in that sense. But on the other hand, I also had that side where I was very energetic and loud. And I think at school especially, I was always a bit like the clown. I was trying to make people laugh. And so that comedy side, which you find in my music videos, and then that serious side, which you find in my photography, I think, it's related to my childhood, I'd say.
Being here in Korea, I'm sure that a lot of people ask you, how is it that you've decided to stay here, for so long? And I'm sure that's not by coincidence. You had an interest in Asian cinema, right, from a pretty early age, and is that what helped kind of inspire you to come here?
Yeah, definitely, partly, I started watching Asian cinema while I was in the US after high school for half a year. I did an internship at a radio station there, but I also had a lot of free time, so I used that free time to rent videos at a good library which I found there, and I watched a lot of films, and then I came across the films of Wong Kar-wai, and he was really inspiring for me, I'd say, and his films were just like so different from what I've seen before. So I was curious.
What do you think was the main difference between some of the movies that you'd seen by him and other movies you had grown up with?
It's the culture, but it was also the spaces and the architecture, like something. I haven't been to Asia at that point, and everything was a lot more condensed, and filming in these tiny spaces, and the textures and colors. Like Wong Kar-wai's cinematographer, Christopher Dahl, like he's an amazing cinematographer, and the beauty of his shots, I think it's also partly what made it for me. So I decided to watch more Asian film, and then I watched a lot of Hong Kong film, Chinese film, Japanese film. Then I wrote my master thesis on Wong Kar-wai, on space and architecture in Happy Together, one of his films.
Imagine me and you, I do. I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl you love and hold her tight. So happy together.
Because I felt I kind of want to devote that to him and like my interest in him and his films to kind of like round it up and sum it up. But at that time I already got to know Korean film. That was while I was in Australia in year 2000. I saw Nowhere to Hide by Im Young-se. And that was also, again, like a very impressive film for me. And even having known Asian film very well at that stage, Korean film felt different to me.
Interesting.
It felt like fresh, and watching more and more Korean films as a follow-up, I felt, they've got stories to tell. And I think it was mainly related to the change which was going on in Korea after the military dictatorship ended. A lot of people, directors, had the possibility to tell the stories they always wanted to tell, and so the cinema has been really interesting in that period of time, the 90s up to early 2000.
Moving on to your experience with TEDx, tell me about how you got hooked up with TEDx here in Korea and what your talk was on.
Right, I think they saw my work online. The Lonely Sea music video, it did really well online and got a lot of plays and big audience. So they contacted me at a far earlier stage to get to know me. And then when the TEDx Seoul was just coming around, they asked me if I wanted to join.
How was that?
Yeah, for me that was a great honor, because I've been watching TED for a long time myself, and I think it's a very interesting format, and they have a lot of interesting people there. And so, if you're a fan of something yourself and then you get to be part of it later, that's a great honor.
Absolutely.
But honestly, I was quite nervous, because suddenly you have to speak in front of a big crowd.
Are you used to doing talks like that in front of people?
Yeah, I do talks at universities, and I do talks at institutions, art institutions. So I've done that, but at the TEDx event, I think I had to talk in front of 500 people. So that big of an audience, that was the first time for me.
Wow. Well, even though it's just you and me talking, I'm just saying that there is probably a much larger audience than 500 watching this show.
I know, but I'm always comfortable with cameras, because I work in that field. But if face to face, but once you're on the stage of TED, you forget about it. And so I think the speech went fine, but it was a great honor for me to show and to talk about my work.
Fantastic.
I appreciate it then.
Let's get into a little bit about your philosophy as a photographer and filmmaker. Now, actually, before talking about that, how is it that you have both careers kind of simultaneously? Most people, don't they choose either photography or filmmaking? And it seems very ambitious to do both.
Right.
So why both?
It doesn't make it easy to do two things, of course. But I started with photography, and I had this interest in filmmaking for a long time with a theoretical background, and when I made the decision to start practical filmmaking, I just didn't want to give up photography. And I didn't see any reason or purpose in it, because I thought if I continue with photography, it will always help me. Because if I work as a cinematographer, I need to frame, and I need to come up with beautiful shots. And if you work on film, everything needs to happen really quickly.
Yes.
So where do I get this practice from? Yeah, if I'm out and about myself, and if I play around with my photo camera, and so it totally made sense to me to continue with photography. But I also met a lot of people who couldn't understand it, and who would tell me, like, why do you still do photography? Yeah? And so it's on the one hand related to my passion, but on the other hand, I think at an early stage I realized the development of the industry, because suddenly you had these digital photo cameras which you could also take like video with, yeah? And so over the time, now it's starting to become a more common thing, but suddenly photographers also got interested in filmmaking because they had a camera they could shoot film with, yeah? And then of course you're curious, okay, what can I do with it? And you start playing around with it. So I'm quite happy that I started with this at an early stage. If I think of me like traveling to different places, experiencing different cultures, trying out different things, and pursuing my career as a filmmaker and photographer, but also being a father and like having a family, I think in the end it's about home and where you feel comfortable. And I think like home is kind of where your heart is, yeah? Because in Korea many times I'm asked about like being a foreigner, and when I would go home to live in Germany again. But home for me right now is Seoul, Korea. So that's kind of like the ideal sense of living, and in a positive sense that it's not like related to nationalities, and it's more to character and where you feel comfortable to be.
Nils, I know you've created a few movies over the years, and can you tell me a little bit about each of them?
Yeah, which one? Yeah, I mainly did short films over the years, but also a feature film with my working partner Neil, which I told you earlier about. And yeah, that for me was a really special project, yeah, because it was shot in Seoul, but it was also shot in Germany, in Berlin. So Berlin was the place where I lived before I came here, so I could relate to both places really well. And also Neil, like, it was a film where I worked as a cinematographer, and he gave me a lot of creative freedom, which I really appreciated, because there's different directors you work with, yeah, and you have directors who try to control like every aspect of filmmaking, yeah, which is also fine, yeah, but of course, as a cinematographer, you also, you wish you can be creative and bring something to the film, yeah. So that was special to me. Yeah?
Great.
Then I did a series of 1-minute films. That was an interesting medium for me to play with, because if you limit yourself, like to create or tell a story within 1 minute, it's not easy in the first place, yeah?
Yeah, it's easier to tell a story or give an answer that's an extended thing, but then to really make it concise is much more challenging, for sure.
So in the first films we made, we had a lot of actors, we had a lot of locations, and then you realize, yeah, it's not working, you know, you need to cut that down. And so in the end I try to like tell the stories like more and more simple, yeah? And yeah, short films, but I think what was really special for me were the music videos, yeah? And you talk about films, I answer with music videos, but yeah, I think they're little short films, and so they're really connected to me and Neil, to us as filmmakers, and also to Stu with Sin City. But it's also work, yeah, I'm still really proud of, and which I still enjoy to watch. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we didn't do that bad with it.
Very cool. Very cool. What do pictures or images mean to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of things like doing daily life, even like walking around without the camera, I see it through the lens. Yeah, and I did a photo diary for 1 year while I was in Seoul. It was an exercise for me in the first place, where I wanted to train my eye, where I go outside and like look for things which I can shoot. So like every day I collected one image. The diary, I turned it into a book in the end and made a layout of it. But for me, it was mainly an exercise to go out there and to see stuff and to see new stuff and to train my eye.
Are there any future projects that you'd like to kind of work on, and are there any things in the works that you can tell us about?
Yeah, future project is definitely holidays first of all.
Oh, nice.
But before the holidays, I will actually go to Japan to document an exhibition for Seoul.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's a contemporary Korean artist, and his work is very much related to space and architecture. So, yeah, kindly he contacted me and asked if I could document that exhibition for him.
Fantastic.
And then maybe later throughout the year it will also lead into a documentary which I might shoot on him.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're looking forward to some R&R with your family soon?
Definitely, yeah. And definitely with the cold weather right now, yeah, it's good to get out a bit and tank a bit of sunlight.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So any last things that you'd like to kind of mention about your work? Any future goals and plans in mind?
I think something I like to mention goes more out to the audience, and maybe future filmmakers out there, because I mentioned the name Christopher Doyle before, and I think for him, like he for me was a great inspiration, because in interviews often he would say, with digital filmmaking, just go out and shoot. You don't have any excuse not to do it anymore, because it doesn't involve necessarily like finances to be creative anymore. So I think it's important, if you have the dream of being a photographer, filmmaker, just like go out and do it. But there's so many distractions for us on the daily basis, and often we get tied up to the computer, like with post work. You also have to do a lot of office work, office labor, but be out there and shoot, and that's also something I need to tell myself every time. I gotta be out there, I gotta do this, and I've got so many ideas sitting there, and I wish I could make something out of all of them. But
if you had to kind of either do a photograph or kind of a short film about just even this interaction, how would you frame this story of you and me doing this interview?
Oh, that's tricky. Not in a wide shot, like something more tight, which maybe tells the story without like being too direct about it. Like I really enjoyed the conversation, and it felt nice, warm, and comfortable to me. So maybe like have a little, I don't know, maybe just like the skin or something, with some texture. I don't know. Let me work on it.
Got it. Well, Nils, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I think that a lot of people will be not only inspired to maybe even visit Seoul in Korea because of some of the work that you've done, but also any aspiring filmmakers or photographers out there will get some good advice from you with your own experiences. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and you can always find me on my website and trace me down through Vimeo and contact me. I found other collaborators through Vimeo who I ended up working together with. So it's always a great thing to get to know like other creative people and who are keen to work with each other, because that's what filmmaking at least is about, like collaborations.
Well, Nils, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the interview.
Thank you so much for having me here, Susan.
Anytime.
I really appreciate it. Okay.
Hey, let's have some drinks.
Cheers.